You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy Mooney. Welcome to the show, Health Innovators. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with Eli Packouz, who is the CEO and co-founder of Instafloss. Welcome to the show, Eli.
Thank you for having me.
It is so good to have you here. So I like to start off every episode with having my guests share a little bit about their background and what you've been innovating these days.
Yeah, so my background is an inventor. This Instafloss is actually my second company. My first company, I came out with 7 products in the music technology space, which I know is quite different from the dental space.
Yeah.
But one day, I, like many people, had an encounter with flossing, and I was like, this just is taking so long. It's just so annoying. There was like mango everywhere. It was like there has to be a way to do this better. So I became obsessed with it. I started getting periodontal textbooks. I started reading them through, being like, what is flossing? And then I teamed up with when I had an idea and I had some idea of how I wanted to tackle the issue. I was like, okay, I need to get people who know way more than me on this, because I come from a technology perspective, but we need people with some deeper understanding. So I teamed up with Dr. Ralph Raud, who has done a lot of work with fluid mechanics, and Dr. Ana Mascarenhas, who's the chair of the American Dental Association Council of Scientific Affairs. And I presented my plans. They're like, this could work, but, and then 5 years later, after the buts, we are ready to come to market with a device that can floss all of your teeth in 10 seconds painlessly and can assure that you do it correctly.
So much to unpack here. One, is it available on the market? Or if not, when will it be?
So we've been taking pre-orders.
Okay.
And we've taken about $2.5 million worth of pre-orders. And I'm actually having this conversation with you from Mexico, where we are doing our manufacturing. We're North American made. And we are currently setting up a manufacturing, and we're estimated to be done manufacturing towards the end of July. Obviously, I don't want to make promises, but definitely within a few months, you should be able to get an Instafloss delivered to your door.
Excellent. So there's been so many people that have tried to improve flossing for a number of years. So why is it so difficult to break through, and what are you doing that's different?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, it's one of the first things I did was conduct a lot of research, and some novel research that didn't exist out there. I had to gather this data myself. We know from the ADA that 70% of Americans regularly skip flossing, and 30% of them roughly report they never do it. So if you're trying to solve this problem, the first question you have to ask is, why don't they do it? So the top 3 reasons they gave was, the number 1 reason by far was, it just takes too long. I've already brushed my teeth. That already took forever. Do I really have to do this other thing right before bed when I'm tired? So the time was the biggest issue. The second issue was the pain. And definitely the less frequently you do it, the more of an issue that pain is going to be. So you kind of have this feedback loop there. And the third issue is that even those who do floss tend not to see such great results. And it's not because flossing doesn't work. If you look at studies, and we have 2 groups of people, one, people who floss themselves, and the other group of people who are flossed by dentists. And then we compare them against a group that didn't floss. The group that flossed themselves is marginally better than the group that didn't floss. And the group that was flossed by dentists is significantly better than the group that did floss. So flossing works. But most people don't do it correctly. So we have to remove the user error out of the equation as much as possible, or people are going to be discouraged by the results. There's almost no point in doing it. The difference between efficacy and effectiveness, a thing that's 100% efficacious, but people don't do it, is 0% effective. Right. So it has to work both in the lab and in your home.
Makes sense. So let's touch on a little bit about how flossing or just oral health influences health overall, because most of what we're talking about on this show is healthcare, what some might seem called traditional healthcare. But I think, like we had talked about previously, that those lines are really being blurred. And what is healthcare? We've got a lot more wellness being incorporated into healthcare, dental care, or oral care, oral healthcare. So just why does this even matter when it comes to everyone's health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always been quite the historical anomaly that your eyes and your teeth are not part of your overall health. Why? Those both seem very important, and they've been historically important. I mean, well, let's not underestimate eyes, but also teeth.
Yep.
We have
I would
evidence.
like to keep mine.
Oh, that is a common way for historically people to, you lose your teeth and you can't eat very well. But we have evidence for flossing going back 1.8 million years. Before we were human, we were still flossing, and these days we have some pretty good data to show why that's important. So the mouth is a gateway to the rest of your body, and inflammation tends to travel from one part of your body to another and exacerbates systems. It goes through your blood, and of course, mucous membranes are a great pathway to all that blood. So if you have inflammation in your mouth, this is linked, and I don't even know how many studies there are showing these links. I mean, there's so many linking pretty much anything that is made worse with inflammation is made worse by poor oral health. So we see links between poor oral health and worsened arthritis systems, worsened Alzheimer's systems, worsened like erectile dysfunction, worsened cardiovascular issues. So you could almost view it like the first line of defense, like this is an open, gaping area to the rest of the world. And we're a lot of foreign, it's the first contact with a lot of, I guess other than the skin, but it's a contact with a lot of foreign microbes. And taking care of it is definitely correlated with so many aspects of the rest of your health. So you need to do it. And in order for people to do it, we have to remove the obstacles for them to do it. And that's what we've been trying to accomplish.
Awesome. So the analogy or the comparison that comes to mind when I think about what you're doing, I think of Dollar Shave Club, where there were, competing against huge incumbents with tons of brand equity, really, really big pockets, but yet, some kind of way, and in many ways, their strategy, their product, their go-to-market strategy, their business model was very, very different. And they ended up stealing market share away from some of those really large incumbents. So what is it that is different about your commercial strategy and business model that's going to help you do the same thing?
Yeah, that's the crucial aspect of any business.
Yep, $1 million question.
Perhaps the multi-billion-dollar question.
Yeah, right.
Play your cards right. So I would think we're more akin to Roomba than we are to Dollar Shave Club.
Okay.
Dollar Shave Club is selling a commodity that is almost identical to every other commodity, and their competitive edge is simply like in their logistics and their marketing, and ways they can reduce costs in packaging and subscriptions and so on. And we do have an element of that, which I could get into in a bit. However, I think the core proposition that we have is not just that like, oh, we're more convenient in terms of a subscription, or perhaps we're slightly cheaper, but the core proposition we have is that you have three obstacles to flossing, 3 complaints, 3 reasons why people don't do it or are not satisfied with their flossing when they do it. And we are the first product to actually solve these issues. So I think the company historically that is the most comparable to us is Waterpik. Waterpiks was developed in, I think, the late 50s. They were on the market in the 60s. So there's a little bit of delay between R&D and market launch. And they actually do 2 things better than string floss. Number one, because the water pressure is adjustable, you don't have to experience pain. Sure, if you go all the way to max pressure, you're not used to it, it's going to hurt. But if you start at a low pressure and slowly build up, they resolve the pain issue. The second thing is that it's actually more effective than string floss. So because water molecules are smaller, they could get deeper underneath the gum line. So where string can only go a certain amount underneath the gum line, water can get deeper. A string tends to only get interproximally, so in between the teeth underneath the gum line, whereas water can go a full 360 degrees. You have your tooth and then it's surrounded a full 360 degrees by a gum line, and you want to clean all the way around it, and that's almost impossible to do via string. So you can clean more areas and you can clean them better. So what are the downsides? The number one downside is you have to articulate the floss correctly. So you have to not miss any areas. And you have to trace both on the front and the back, and to not miss any areas in the back where you can't see, especially since it has to be at a 90-degree angle for the maximum effects, is actually incredibly difficult. And some people, like when they're trying to see if they're getting at the right angle in the back, they make a mess and they leave 1 star on Amazon. If you look at the 1-star reviews, it's like, I made a mess because I couldn't see, Yep. And the number 2 issue is that to do it correctly takes even longer than string to floss. So you solve the number 2 issue, but you make the number 1 issue worse. Now, they still provide a large benefit, and their company was bought for $1 billion in 2017 by Church & Dwight. And that's the spot.
Right. Okay. I said, we'll take it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's they had no patents. No relevant patents, I should say. They had patents, but if you go on Amazon or you go anywhere, you can see a myriad of near identical products. So the core technology is not protecting their market share at all. So they had no relevant patents to protecting market share, and they made the number 1 complaint worse. And they were still bought for $1 billion. So the way we work is we sort of piggyback on their technology. We know that these jets are effective. We know that they're more effective than string, but only if you actually cover 100% of the area at the right angle. So what we do is we use 12 jets that are aligned on the front and the back of your teeth, on the top and the bottom, and it rotates from one side of your mouth to the other. And this way, it's always at the 90-degree angle. It provides 100% coverage. And because we have 12 jets moving simultaneously, we're able to finish the whole floss in 10 seconds. So our core proposition is it's the benefits of a water pick without the downsides. Not only the downsides, but something completely novel. We can do it in 10 seconds. We can assure 100% coverage. So you can expect less user error. You can expect better results. So you can be more encouraged to floss. And of course, going into this, knowing that there's sort of with the Harry's model, there's a lot of people with deep pockets. We are patent granted. We have multiple granted patents. And perhaps as part of an exit strategy, Philips or Church & Dwight or, one of these various companies are going to realize that patent is going to be a lot more powerful in their hands than in ours.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. Let's plan for it, right? So, one of the things that I thought would be so interesting for us to talk about is your direct consumer strategy. So in traditional healthcare, there's a lot of innovators like yourself, whether they're, experienced and well-versed in healthcare or just a technologist that's a newcomer to healthcare, but that are trying to circumvent the traditional healthcare system and all the bureaucracy with reimbursement and regulatory, which with your product, aren't necessarily facing. But nonetheless, I think that there's still a lot to be learned for those innovators that are thinking about or activated direct consumer strategies. So let's talk about what your strategies and tactics are for acquiring pre-orders. What are some of the unique things that you're doing that are working? Maybe some things that you've tried that aren't working, and how you're going to acquire new customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the first thing before we even get to this is that you have to know if you're a fit for direct to consumer. Not everybody is. Now we are because there's been like 60 years of research on water flossing. we are using the core water flossing technology. Sure, we use a lot more jets and we aim them automatically, but each jet is already approved by the FDA. So we're a class 1 medical device, and we're what the FDA calls substantially similar. So we don't have to go through that sort of regulatory body where we're not even allowed to sell to people until we pass through that. So that's number one. Number two, it is a consumer product. If this was a device that was only being used by a dentist or some medical professional, direct to consumer wouldn't, really be incredibly relevant. The third thing I would say that is like really useful for us, knowing that direct to consumer is a pathway for us, is that it's very easy for the consumer to understand. So if you sort of hit all of these on the head, then this is a pathway. So what we did is we crowdfunded the product. This way, we didn't have to raise as much money from investors. We're able to get a lot more money, as well as prove that people wanted this. Because you could say as an investor, like, oh, maybe people want it, maybe they don't. Maybe people, sure, they say on the survey that the reason they're not flossing is that it's too slow. But exactly, money talks. Money talks. So I actually have run campaigns before. That's actually how I started my first business. Like over 10 years ago, before I had zero investment, zero funding of any sort. Me and my brother, we ran a bootstrapped crowdfunding campaign, and we actually broke a record in the category at the time. So I came to it with a bit of experience, though in 10 years, a lot of things had changed.
A lot has changed. Yeah.
But the number one thing I would say for a successful crowdfunding campaign is you need a successful day one, because success breeds success, and failure, gets you pushed down the algorithm. And both are feedback loops. They're feedback loops in either direction. So what we had to do was we had to gather emails. And so we ran ads to gather email lists to know that we had enough people to launch the campaign. However, emails tend to go to a spam folder. So we used a myriad of tricks. One trick, I think the nicest one, is we would send an email that was plain text, very personal, saying like, thank you for signing up. We're trying to, solve the obstacles to flossing to make it better for you. Can you please tell me what you don't like about flossing? Perhaps we can include in the product to make it better. And people, they love being asked this question. They would respond. So we had a rule that you can never leave a response unresponded to. So if they wrote something back, we would have to write back to them. And if they responded to that, we'd have to write back. And so we were responding to emails like all day. But what this does is gets you out of the spam folder. And puts you at the top. So that way, when we actually launched, we had a lot more bang for our buck in terms of the amount of people who actually went to the campaign. So that's just like the first step. Crowdfunding is only like the tiny little baby step towards getting to market. It's a very useful step because it can give you a lot more money up front, which we're able to use to do more studies, which we're able to use to build molds and order parts and start manufacturing and so on. But in terms of getting to market, that's only like a kind of a validation, a little bit of early cash. That's not what's going to do it. So for market, we have a tiered strategy, and that is twofold. One, we're going to start with e-commerce, then third-party e-commerce, then retail and dental partnerships. And the reason why we do it in that order is two reasons. One, as we ramp up production, we may be inventory limited. So if we're inventory limited, we want to sell where we have the highest margin. That's one reason. It's a cash flow reason, but there's a bigger reason. And the stronger reason is that each of those steps is further away from our control. On your website, you could A/B test things all day. You could change the price. You can change the images. You could change what you're, highlighting. On Amazon, they limit it, or Walmart or other third-party sites. They limit it, and they don't want you changing it all day. Retail contracts, dental partnerships, you have a contract. It's illegal for you to change anything. You can't go in and switch out the box or change the price on them. So what we want to do is we want to make sure every step of the way that we're being as efficient as possible. So we want to start with a few months of testing, on our website, and then testing to see on third parties. That way, by the time we go to retail and by the time we go to dental partnerships, we know that we have the highest chance of success, because you don't want to scale spending all this money on inventory and then your scaling is inefficient, because that will hurt your cash flow, and scaling with a hurt cash flow is a great way to spiral into debt.
Or a broken funnel, a broken sales and marketing funnel, right? For a number of different reasons, right? The message, the color of the button, the position of the text on the landing page, like you said, the thousands of little nuances that can be a game changer and need to be not irritated, iterated. There you go. Thank you.
Although it can be an irritating process, I agree.
Yes, it can be very irritating, especially when you have a client or you have a CEO or founder that is just like, just let's do it, right? They don't want to wait for that learning to take place, that testing, but it's really incredibly valuable. And so that's very exciting. I think that organizations and leaders like yourself that are going down that path are going to see a lot greater commercial success because of that testing and experimentation. It might take you a little bit longer. It might cost a little bit more money in that little trickle effect before you're getting to cash flow positive, but it's well worth the investment.
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial. Otherwise, you're sort of just shooting blindly in the dark. I mean, this is actually like the fundamental, like core approach. Is when I was hiring people as the CMO for our company, I would ask people some questions like, here's an example landing page. What would you do in order to improve this? And people would very confidently give like, oh, we would do this, or we would do that, or this is definitely going to improve your ROI 10x, whatever. And then I was interviewing one guy. I was like, what would you do? They're like, what would be better? And he says, well, I have no idea what would be better, but but I have a number of methods to find out.
You're
and I was like, exactly. It's like, this is the guy. You don't want to have the answers already. You want to have the ability to find out the answers.
Oh my gosh, I preach this stuff. It's mind-boggling to me when you have so many people that sit in these conference rooms and argue and banter back and forth on what is the right way. And it usually defaults to what I call the hippo, which is the highest paid person's opinion, which often is the founder, CEO, and everybody just kind of defers to them. And then it's a recipe for failure, for disaster, as opposed to, we don't have the answers. Let's make our customers part of our marketing team.
Yes. I could not agree more. I think that people in meetings should propose hypotheses, but not answers. Answers are only revealed to you by the data. They're in person. We just have guesses about how the world works. So yeah, no, that's absolutely crucial. And especially today, when we have so much data available to us in so many different ways, it's irresponsible not to take that approach.
Yeah. The one thing that I think we're still challenged with is that restraint to test one variable at a time, as opposed to, well, let's just change the headline, let's move the button, let's do all of these little nuances, and then we see some incremental improvement, but we really are not sure what drove the success because we changed 8 things at one time.
Well, I mean, you could test more than one variable at a time, but you'd really be splitting up your traffic. So it depends how much traffic you have, right?
Right. Yeah.
If you have enough traffic, you can create, like, obviously you don't want to create one condition where you change 8 things and one condition where you change 0 things, because that tells you nothing. Yeah. But if you create, 64 different conditions in which you can actually see one change between them each, then you could actually tell something. The issue is that if you don't have enough traffic, it will take you 300 years to know which one's better, and that's not very useful. So you have to know what your testing capacity is. So one of the things we do when we're having these sort of meetings is we all have 1,000 ideas of what could be better, but we don't have the bandwidth to test them all. So we sort of vote on what we think is going to have the highest change in terms of like the difference. If someone's like, I think this on the contact page, if we change the font from 11 to 12, maybe people are going to see the contact page and people are going to write in, be like, maybe you're right. Yeah. But I don't know if that's going to make as much of a difference than if we change the video on top. So maybe we'll put that lower down on the thing, and we can vote on it.
The famous example that I use often is Microsoft, where they literally changed the color of a button and it made a difference in millions of dollars of revenue that was generated.
Wow.
We,
Well, I
we
mean,
all
they have the volume, you know,
we,
they have
we all
like
want
that
to
many.
stumble upon that, right? And you're right, they're running tens of thousands of tests on any given day because of the volume that they have. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, don't underestimate the button color, especially like the buy now button. What we have discovered was that if it's within the site's color scheme, it blends in.
Yeah.
So that button has to be like ugly. It has to stick out like a sore thumb. It has to be like, oh, you've got this nice blue and white theme. No, but that one's yellow or something, you know, like.
So what you are communicating to me, as well as our audience, that I think is so incredibly important, is your ego, your expertise, your personal preferences or opinions are really put to the side. You're removing a lot of that bias that a lot of innovators have going into this, especially if they've done this before, because this worked last time. So of course it's going to work this time. And then you are also, what I think is also fundamental is you are putting together a go-to-market plan and implementing that with testing and experimentation in an effort to uncover what you don't know. Whereas a lot of innovators that I talk to, they're doing that exercise just really to validate what they already believe. And they're looking for data to validate what they believe so then they can move fast and furious forward, as opposed to learning something that they don't know that maybe changes things in a way that doesn't really align with their personal opinions or beliefs.
Right. Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I don't understand why that would be so important, because in terms of like validating yourself, it's like, why do you care? Like, you should care whether or not your business is growing or shrinking, and that alone should be the primary thing on which you are judging your success or failure.
Right.
You know, like there's been like a number of times we've done tests where I didn't want the result to be one way because I felt it was just prettier another way.
Right.
So I'll give you a great example. This is probably not something that would actually carry over to Instafloss, but at my previous company, we weren't a medical device, so we didn't have to have the same level of like professionalism. At least that's my hypothesis. So we started experimenting with emails, and one person had the idea that we noticed the trend that the less corporate the email seemed, the higher of a response rate we got. And so someone was like, well, you know what would make it seem very much like it was just coming from a regular person is if we threw in a couple typos. And I was like, no, this is so unprofessional. This is terrible. We can't tarnish the reputation of our company like this. It's like, no, but it's just coming from a guy who's just checking up on you and wanting to know how you're enjoying your product. And, if maybe you want to upgrade to the next version, but it's just from one person to another. I was like, okay, fine, run the test. This is stupid. And we saw like a 30% increase.
Wow.
So
That's
like,
incredible.
Fine, take it.
Well, that is definitely a lesson for our audience to note.
Yeah, so you have to take the ego out of it. It's like I like on principle, it's like, no, we are not associating our company with typos. This is the worst idea ever. Like on a matter of ego, really. I just want to refuse this.
Yeah.
But that's not what matters. Who cares how big your ego is,
do you want to be right, or do you want to change the world? Do you want to be right, or do you want to be a millionaire or billionaire, right?
Would you rather have a fatter ego or a fatter wallet?
Right, exactly.
So, take your pick.
So as someone who has launched numerous products previously, serial inventor, what are some of the lessons learned that we maybe haven't talked about that you want to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say if you're making hardware stuff, like I've always done. I mean, I've also done software projects, but the software has been like an add-on to the hardware. But nothing is ever improved in production. Don't start your molds thinking that it's going to I don't really like the prototype. But when we actually, get molds, when we get molded, it's because it's 3D printed. But if it was molded, I'm sure it would be better. you're gonna have to make compromises in manufacturing, and those compromises, due to a number of reasons of like, the ability of what can be molded is very different from what can be 3D printed or cut. And those compromises may improve the product, but they may not. So this is going to be like a whole second round of engineering. And the better of a place you start with your prototype, the better of a time you're going to have in engineering for manufacturing. So I've actually seen a company that knew the CEO and they went bankrupt because of this. They didn't have a first of all, an understanding of what can be molded versus cut or printed, and that really hurt them. And they were expecting certain issues to be resolved rather than worsened in production, and they were sorely disappointed on both fronts. So I would say that is a probably if this is your first time going through it, it's probably the biggest thing that I don't see that anywhere online, right? No one ever talks. It's like, but it's so crucial because you have to, like, yes, your go-to-market strategy, your team, your people, everything is like super important to your success or your failure. But all of that hinges on the quality of your product. If you don't have a good product, I mean, sure, you could be like a scammer or something, but like that doesn't have a very good shelf life, like there's only so far you can get with that. And on moral and business grounds, I don't think you should do that. So you need to have a good product. And in order to do that, you have to make it through manufacturing. And I would say that has always been the most difficult part of iteration of product development. And so you definitely want to work with someone who's worked with manufacturing before, because it's a whole other different beast to prototype engineering. And you want to have that in mind, and you want to make sure that you are 100% satisfied with your product before you move forward and spend all your money on mass producing it.
So is there a particular reason why you selected manufacturing in Mexico versus in the States versus maybe in another country?
Yes. So there's a number of reasons. The first reason is that the price was actually one of the best. It was about the same as China. Because when you factor in the prices, you have to factor in shipping costs. And moving things have gotten a lot more expensive recently, moving over seas. So the first is just that the price was good. The second reason was that China is potentially a little bit more riskier than it used to be. We don't know how future politicians of either our country or their country are going to react to whatever may happen in the future. So if China was like a tenth the price, maybe that's worth the risk. But if it's the same price with a higher risk, why would you take a higher risk for the same price? That just doesn't make any sense. And the third reason is that Mexico is a lot closer to our primary market. Now, the United States isn't the only market in the world, but it is by far the largest single market. And so the closer you are, the quicker your shipment times can be, which means that you have to put your down payments for the production run a little later than you would if you were making China. Because in China, if you were going to ocean ship it, let's say it takes you 3 months to manufacture. If it takes you 3 months to manufacture and then 1 month to ship, then you have to put your down payment 4 months in advance. If it takes you 3 months to manufacture and like a day to ship, then you only have to put your down payment 3 months in advance. So the closer you are to your primary market, the better your cash flow position is going to be, because the less you need to finance in advance. So those are the three reasons: the cost, the risk, the proximity, which translates into better cash flow. And that's why we chose Mexico.
That's awesome. Thanks, Eli, for sharing your experience and your expertise with us and your own commercialization journey. How can folks get a hold of you if anyone wants to follow up with you after the show?
Absolutely. Go to instafloss.com, scroll to the bottom, you'll see a contact, and just message us. It'll get through to me. I'll make sure of that.
Scroll right past that buy now button, right? Or
if you can resist it, if you can somehow manage the willpower to resist that
color of that button. Exactly. Well, thank you for joining me today.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a very fun conversation.
Awesome.